Hello and welcome to the Hello Fabric tutorial video. This is version 1.0 of this video. We will update these videos as the testbed evolves. Please go to the link in the description below to find a list of all of our videos and the most updated version of each video. Today, we're going to walk you through creating your first Fabric slice using the FabLib API in a Jupyter notebook. During this tutorial, you will create a bastion host key that will be used to access your Fabric slices, launch your FABRIC JupyterHub environment, install your bastion host key and configure your FABRIC JupyterHub environment, launch your first Fabric slice, and execute a simple command in your slice to confirm that your environment is configured correctly. Before you begin this tutorial, you should have already created a Fabric account and have been added to a Fabric project. So accessing your experiment requires you to jump through a bastion host using SSH. The first step in configuring this and for your environment is to create your bastion host key pair. To create your bastion host key pairs, you log into the portal and click on the experiments tab in the portal, and then select manage SSH keys on the side here. The first thing you'll notice here is that you have your bastion login ID at the top. This is an important ID that you can always come back here and get it at any time. This is the ID that you will use to log in through the bastion host. Next, you'll notice two tabs here, or Sliver and Bastion. These are the keys where you will manage either Sliver keys and bastion host keys. Eventually, Sliver keys will be managed in the portal, and those will be used to, we will install those into your virtual machines and other hosts on the system. For now, they're not used, so you can ignore them. But bastion host keys are currently used and required to access your experiments. Right now I have, or by default, you will have no bastion keys available. And the first thing you need to do is to add a bastion key. There are two ways to do this. You can either generate a key or you can create one on your own and upload it. I will show you how to generate the key because this is the easiest way to get started with Fabric. Demo key is what I will choose for the name of my key. You can also write a little description. The description is useful because you can have up to 10 bastion keys, so you can write a little description of what you're using your keys for so that you can organize which ones are which. For now, this will be your first key. You can write any description you like. Down here under key type, you have to choose that you want it to be a bastion key, and then you can choose generate key pair. And this now generated a key pair, a public-private SSH key pair. And you can download the key pair using the pop-up window. I will go ahead and download both the private key and the public key. It's very important that you download the private key at this point because we will not keep your private key at any time. So as soon as this window is gone, we throw away your private key and you have the only copy of it. If you lose that private key, there's no way for us to get it back. And the only way to start reusing the system is to come back to the portal and generate another key pair, which you can do, and it's easy and free, and you can do that at any time. So don't worry too much if you lose your key, but also you need to keep track of your key if you want to access your slivers. Okay, so I've downloaded both of my keys. They should be in my download directory. I will now shut this window, and you can see my bastion key is now listed here. Like I said, you can have up to 10 of these keys and use them for different purposes. For now, I only have one key, and it's my demo key. I can come back here at any time, and I can either download the public key, not the private key, but I can get the public key. It's argued about how useful that is for you personally, but it is an option here. Also, I can come here and I can delete this SSH key if I wanted to revoke the privileges. And if you delete the key, it'll actually remove it from the bastion host, so you can maintain your security that way. All right, so now I have this key created. I've downloaded it, it's in my downloads directory, and I can use it later. The recommended way to use Fabric is through our JupyterHub. We'll now show you how to launch a JupyterHub environment for yourself and configure it to be used with your bastion host keys. So the way you do this is you click on the JupyterHub tab in the portal. It'll ask you to log in again with CI logon. You will log in with your institutional ID, which is the same ID you use to log into the portal. A JupyterHub environment will be built for you. If it's your first time, it might take a little bit longer to build, but once it's built, it'll get faster. Once you log in, you will notice if you're used to Jupyter environments, you will see a very familiar Jupyter lab environment, private for yourself. You will also notice a couple of folders here built into your file manager on the side. The Jupyter examples folder is what we will go through today, and I'll show you a little bit about how to use it. So if you go ahead and click on the Jupyter examples folder, you will see there's a folder full of Jupyter notebooks that will help walk you through using Fabric or getting started with Fabric. So if you click on the Start Here notebook, the Start Here notebook is an index of a bunch of tutorials and examples for you to use to learn about Fabric. Today we were going to go through the Hello Fabric Getting Started tutorial. So you can go ahead and just click on the Hello Fabric tutorial and bring up that notebook. As you can see, this is a notebook that will walk you through creating your very first Jupyter experiment. And it's pretty simple. All it does is create a simple slice with a single node that you will SSH into and start using. So the first thing you need to do to configure this environment is you need to go to this first cell of the Jupyter notebook, and there's 3 things that you're going to need to configure. The first is you need to insert your project ID in this environment variable. So to get your project ID, you come over to the portal, you click on the projects tab, you find the project that you are a member of. I'm going to use the tutorials project as an example. The project ID is right here. You can hit this button to copy it, and you can go back over to the notebook and simply paste your project ID into the notebook. So now this environment variable will have your project ID. The next thing you need to do is to do the same thing, but with your Fabric Bastion username. So same thing, if you go back over to the portal, this time you go back to experiments, manage SSH keys, and now you have your Bastion login ID right here. You can copy that, and you can come over to the Jupyter environment, and you can paste your Bastion user ID into the notebook. The final thing you need to do is set the location of your Bastion private key. By default, this chooses to put it in your home directory /work and called the key fabric _bastion _ key. It's worth noting that if you come up here to your little file manager on the side, you click on the home directory of this file manager. This in fact is the directory home /work. So what we want to do is take your Bastion key that you just downloaded, the private key, and copy it to this directory, and then either change this string here to match the name of your key, or rename your key to match the string that's already here. So I'm going to go to my downloads folder, and I'm going to take my demo key, and I'm going to drag it and drop it right here. Now, what I could do is change this key name here to proot-demo key, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is right-click on the key and rename the key fabric _bastion _ key. And the reason I'm going to do this is all of the other notebooks in these examples all have this already set to fabric _bastion _ key. So I either need to change this key name in one place, or I need to change the path to the key location in all of the notebooks I ever use. So I'm just going to go ahead and change it in one place. I find that a little bit easier. Okay. So now what we're going to do is run this Jupyter notebook. And if you're not familiar with Jupyter notebooks, the way this works is you can read text about how about the experiment you're going to do and the code you're going to run. And then you can select one of the cells, and then you can just hit this play button up here and it'll run that cell. And now what this is like is having an interactive Python experience. So I just ran that first cell. You can see it ran once, and all of these environment variables just got set inside of my notebook. So now what I can do is come down to the next cell, and I can run it. And this cell will actually import the FabLib library, which is pre-installed in your environment. At this point, the FabLib library is configured, and you can start using it. We will now run a cell that will simply list off all the currently available sites on Fabric and just print them. So we're doing a try except, and we're doing fablib.list sites, and this should return a string that's in a tabular format that will show you the current sites, Fabric sites that are up, and then the status in terms of like how many of all the different types of resources are available on those sites. And depending on how busy the system is, it could take various amounts of time. Okay, so now we can see these are the 10 sites that are up today. And you can see there's the amount of cores and RAM and disk that are available on those sites, the number of basic network cards. So these are 100 gigabit network cards that are actually implemented as SROV virtual functions. They are dedicated to you via PCI pass-through. So like all the devices that you get in Fabric are accessed via PCI pass-through or their standalone switches and servers and things like that. This includes these basic NICs that are 100 gigabit SROV virtual functions. The trade-off with these is that since they're SROV virtual functions, you will share bandwidth with other users, but the PCI device itself is dedicated to you. There are also ConnectX 6 100 gigabit times 2 port network cards, and ConnectX 5, which are 25 gigabit times 2 NIC or 2 port cards. And there's fewer of those available, and we ask that you try to use the basic NICs whenever possible. If you need the dedicated access to the PCI devices, go ahead and use the dedicated cards, but otherwise use the basic NICs. We also have NVMe, 1 terabyte NVMe disk drives. These are really fast disks, some Tesla T4 GPUs, as well as RTX 6000 GPUs. And there'll be more types of devices that come online eventually. All right, and now what we're going to do is we're going to create the actual slice. So a slice is a bag of resources that is dedicated to one experiment. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to say fablib.newSlice, which will create the slice, and we will name the slice my slice. You can name it whatever string you like. And we'll get back a slice object. Then we will say slice.addNode, and we will call this node 1, and we'll get back the node object. And then we will say slice.submit, which will actually submit the slice to the Fabric control framework to instantiate the slice, and which in this case is instantiating a single node that is isolated by itself. Let's go ahead and run this and watch it instantiated. What's interesting here is that when you created this node, you didn't pass any other parameters. There are lots more parameters you can pass, and they are actually in a different notebook. And there are things like you can say which host you want the slice to be on, which site you want it to be on, the cores, the RAM, the disk that you want, the image type, and a couple more things. So in this case, we didn't specify any extra parameters, so we got sane defaults. And those sane defaults include a random site. In this case, it's at Salt Lake City. Happen to go to Salt Lake City's the W1, so worker number 1 at Salt Lake City. It has the minimum number of cores on RAM, which is 2 cores and 8 gigs of RAM and 10 gigs of disk. And it defaults to the Rocky 8 image, which if you're familiar with CentOS, Rocky 8 is like CentOS. There are other image types you can choose. And you can see that the slice is currently in a configuring state and the VM is in a ticketed state. So ticketed means that we're trying to instantiate it. And there could be a list of VMs and networks and various other things that are all ticketed and being instantiated over time. And while they are ticketed, the slice itself will be labeled or in the state configuring. Once all of the VMs and networks and such are active, the slice itself will become what's called stable OK. And this should take just a couple minutes to get this stood up. Let's scroll down a little bit here. So now you can see that the slice became active. We got a management IP address. Those are the key IO. Notice that that's an IPv6 IP address. This is totally fine. You will be able to use this. Keep in mind that you have to SSH to these VMs via our bastion host, and our bastion host speaks IPv6. So when you SSH using IPv4 to our bastion host, it will then jump to the backend VM using IPv6, and that's perfectly fine. In this case, you can see it took 112 seconds for the slice to become stable OK. This includes booting the virtual machine, but also running a few tests on the virtual machine and configuring the network if there were one on the virtual machine. So some of this is testing just to make sure the VM is completely ready for you by the time it comes back as active. There's also a post-boot config step, which in this case doesn't do much of anything, but in other cases, it might do some or provide some functionality on behalf of you, the user. But in this case, it's pretty minimal, so it took a second or less. Next, we can get our slice, and we can do things like just try to print off the slice using the FabLab library. So we have our slice object, and if we just print the slice, we will see basically the same output that we saw in the that was up here while we were waiting for the slice to be configured. This is just information, including the slice ID, which may be valuable in the future. We can also get the nodes from the slice and loop through them all and then print off each node. In this case, there's only one node, but you get the point that you would print off all the nodes if you like. This actually has a tabulated version of most of the same information that we saw in the boot sequence. One other thing that's useful is it has this SSH command here that you can use to SSH from a terminal window. So you can see here though that you SSH and you jump through the bastion host, and it's bastion window fabric.testbed.net and using your bastion ID and so forth. And then you log into the backend node using its IPv6 management IP and Rocky, which is the default username in that particular Rocky image. So now we know that our VM is up and running, and what we want to do is run the experiment. This is a pretty boring experiment. You probably want to do something more interesting, but in this experiment, all we're going to do is go through all the nodes in the slice, and we're going to execute the command hello fabric from node and then print off the node's host name. This demonstrates a couple of things. One, to just confirm that your SSH keys and bastion keys are configured correctly. But two, it shows you that you can actually do some pretty useful things using these the FabLab objects, including like on the node, you could say node.execute and execute an arbitrary command. And this might be how you would configure your node. So you can imagine node.execute and then say yum installs a bunch of tools. So here it is. Go ahead and run it, and we see that it prints off hello fabric from node, the node ID and the node name. And you can see when you do the node.execute, you get both the standard out and standard error back. In this case, we're printing standard out. For completeness, we probably should print standard error in case something goes wrong, but we didn't. If you got to this point, then that means your bastion key is set up correctly, your Jupyter environment is configured correctly, your node came up correctly, and you're able to access your VM. So you're done with your experiment. This is the most boring experiment you can do. Hello Fabric experiment. And now what we want to do is clean up your experiment by just deleting the slice. And here we can just say slice.delete, and it will delete your slice. So at this point, the Hello Fabric slice is done, and you have successfully completed the Hello Fabric notebook. Thank you, and please visit the fabric-testbed.net for more information. You can learn more at our forum, and you can go visit our other YouTube videos that show how to use the other features on Fabric. Thank you.